Okay, let's dive into this. Welcome, everyone. Today we're looking at something that feels like a total modern life hack, but is actually a profoundly powerful ancient mental model. We call it the razor of simplicity, or you've probably heard it referred to as Occam's principle. If you've ever found yourself spiraling into those worst case scenarios over just a minor hiccup, or maybe building these massive, complicated theories for something that went slightly off track in your day, well, this explainer is absolutely for you. We are going to explore how just one single, elegantly simple rule can completely transform the way you process information, make decisions, and really just navigate the everyday complexities of life. To get us started, picture this. You are running late for work. You jump in your car, turn the key, and nothing. Just that tragic clicking sound, or maybe just dead silence. So, what is the absolutely first thing you check? I want us to really explore our immediate reactions here. Where does the brain naturally go when faced with this sudden, super frustrating problem? Do you instantly assume the car's entire internal computer system has been fried by some bizarre electrical anomaly? Or do you go somewhere else entirely? Think about the contrast here. You have checking for a dead battery on one hand versus assuming a massive, complex electrical issue on the other. When you're sitting in that silent car, the smartest, most logical first step is to just assume the battery is dead, right? Why? Well, because batteries die all the time. It requires very few assumptions on your part. Maybe you just left an interior light on overnight, or, the battery is simply old. Assuming a catastrophic failure of the central wiring harness, on the other hand, that requires a massive leap of logic and multiple unusual things going wrong at exactly the same time. This simple act of checking the battery first, that is you instinctively applying the very mental model we are unpacking today. So let's meet the historical hero behind this framework. This is William of Ockham, a 14th century English philosopher and theologian. That's right, the modern problem-solving superpower that software engineers, elite detectives, and top doctors rely on actually has its roots firmly planted way back in the 1300s. William of Ockham was essentially looking around at the bloated, incredibly complex academic and theological arguments of his time and realized people were tying their brains in absolute knots for absolutely no reason. He wanted a way to cut through all that noise, right? A method to shave away the unnecessary fluff from an argument, and hence we get the term razor. His core idea was originally phrased exactly like this. Entities should not be multiplied beyond necessity. Okay, it sounds a bit academic, right? But in philosophy, entities really just means things, or assumptions, or variables. Occam was basically saying, look, don't invent extra complications to explain something if you really don't absolutely have to. If a simpler explanation does the job perfectly well, just stop adding extra invisible ingredients to the recipe. And that brings us right to the modern translation. The simplest explanation is usually the best one. This is our big aha moment. It's brilliant in just its direct elegance. It literally acts like a razor, slicing away the wild theories, the paranoid assumptions, and all those convoluted what-ifs that constantly cloud our judgment. Now, it's super important to note the word usually here. It's not some unbreakable law of physics. It's a heuristic. It's a highly reliable rule of thumb. But by starting with the simplest explanation, man, you save immense amounts of time and mental energy that you'd otherwise just waste chasing shadows. This whole principle is really built on three key ideas. The foundation is simplicity, meaning we prefer explanations with fewer moving parts and way fewer variables. That naturally goes hand in hand with parsimony, which is essentially just being frugal with our assumptions and actively dodging unnecessary complexity. And finally, empiricism grounds the entire concept right back in reality. It reminds us to rely on observable evidence. Don't go basing theories on wild guesses when the actual observable facts are sitting right there in front of you. Let's see how this builds out in a high-stakes environment. Imagine a patient walks into a clinic with a fever, a cough, and a runny nose. The doctor has to make a choice here. Is this a super common diagnosis, like the seasonal flu? Or is it some incredibly rare exotic disease that just happens to share those exact same symptoms? Well, Occam's razor demands that the doctor look for the common flu first. In fact, in medical school, there's a really famous diagnostic proverb based entirely on this. When you hear hoofbeats behind you, think horses, not zebras. And this brilliantly illustrates just how universally applicable this razor is across completely different fields. In medicine, like we just talked about, it's used for diagnosing efficiently. Over in physics, scientists use it to explain natural phenomena. They prefer the standard theory of gravity over some convoluted model that requires invisible forces. In computer science, coders apply it for debugging all the time. If an app crashes, they look for a simple typo before they just assume the global server architecture collapsed. And naturally, in everyday life, it's exactly how we troubleshoot household issues. It scales perfectly from your daily chores all the way up to advanced sciences. Adopting this mindset completely shifts your own approach too. In science, researchers are taught to actively choose theories with fewer hypothetical entities. In your daily problem solving, it trains you to favor simple, highly practical solutions over massive, convoluted fixes. And perhaps, most importantly, in critical thinking, it really turns you into a healthy skeptic. When someone pitches an overly complex explanation for why something happened, especially if it involves, a massive, coordinated conspiracy with hundreds of moving parts, Occam's razor prompts you to step back and ask, isn't it far more likely someone just made a simple human mistake? The cognitive benefits of actually applying this framework are massive. It significantly reduces cognitive bias, basically forcing objectivity when we might otherwise invent complex justifications just to soothe our own anxieties. Because of that, it naturally encourages really rigorous critical thinking by making us justify every single assumption we make. This leads directly to incredibly efficient problem solving. I mean, you aren't wasting hours testing million-to-one scenarios right out of the gates. All of this ultimately fosters a genuine sense of skepticism and humility, reminding us that we really don't need wild stories to understand the world. The plain truth is often sitting right there. But we do have to pause here and ask, is simple always right? I want us to critically engage with that for a second. We spent all this time praising the beauty of simplicity, but if we just blindly swing this razor at every single problem in our lives, are we going to make mistakes? The world is a messy, chaotic, and sometimes highly complex place. So does the absolute simplest explanation ever fail us? Well, the short answer is yes, which brings us to the very real limitations of Occam's razor. We have to be super careful of oversimplification. Sometimes a problem is genuinely complex, and blindly stripping away details actually removes the actual truth. There's also the risk of ignoring rare but possible explanations. Remember that doctor looking for horses instead of zebras? Well, sometimes it actually is a zebra. If you only ever assume the common cold, eventually a rare disease is going to slip by. And finally, there's a really real difficulty in defining simplicity in the first place. I mean, what seems like a wonderfully simple equation to a brilliant astrophysicist might seem impossibly complex to someone else. Simplicity itself can be highly subjective. So, as we wrap up this explainer, I want to leave you with this core takeaway. Favor simplicity and elegance over unnecessary complexity. Occam's razor isn't some flawless law of nature, sure, but as a guiding principle, it is an absolutely unmatched tool for clearing the fog of overthinking. By shaving away the unnecessary assumptions, you become a faster, more effective, and far more grounded critical thinker. You learn to see the world not for what it could wildly be, but for what it most likely is. So, I'll leave you with this final provocative question to ponder today. Where in your own life are you multiplying entities beyond necessity?